Eric, you want to do a roll call?
Yes. So we have Tom DeVee.
Yep.
Arlene Zorgman.
Yes.
Josh Jansky. Glenn Pepper. Jenna Reed.
Yes.
Lauren Selly. Here. Carrie Snow. Present. Molly O'Donnell.
Here.
Lisa Gallagher.
Here.
Kendra Daniels. Here. And Sarah Howard. Here.
All right, next up on the agenda is approval of minutes from our January 9th, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion? All right, got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right,
I just have
any discussion?
one question.
Okay.
Under where it's talking about land donation, it talks about affordable housing at 9th and Terry, but on the information that was sent to us, it says 19th and Terry. So maybe that needs to be changed to 19th and Terry.
Good catch. Any other modifications? All right, we've got one modification. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Number 3 is designate the 2024 official posting location for LHA Advisory Board meeting agendas.
Can you help with this one, Erica? We're doing this for every advisory board group for the year.
So the official postings that we've done before are on the City of Longmont website, so the agenda management portal, as well as the Longmont Housing Authority website, and then the west side entrance of the Center Cemetery.
So if you want that to remain the same, I'll just.
Anybody have any opinions on that? I'd say just keep it as status quo.
Yeah.
Last year. All right, let's go to number 4, public invited to be heard. I don't see anyone. Let's go to 5, organizational updates.
We do have an organizational update. We put the LHA Assistant Director position out there, and we've had a small pool of candidates that are qualified, but we have decided to hire Lauren Selly as our LHA Assistant Director starting February 26th. So, congratulations, we're super excited and happy. That also does mean that she wouldn't be able to serve on this board anymore. So, the clerk's office is organizing a round of board recruitments for the spring. And so I think that this, because your start date would be February 26th, that this would be your last meeting on this board. But she'll still be here. She'll still be here, just in a different capacity.
We could just grill you at that point.
That's
Right.
I don't know anything yet.
Right. So we'll have a vacancy on this board as of the next meeting, and then we'll go through that board recruitment process in the spring.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Housing updates generally, so we're finally getting the housing team globally, both on the LHA side and the city side, staffed. So Katie Holland, who you all know, will be back Tuesday of next week. And then we also hired Christy Weissman.
Christy Weissman to replace Den Police as the housing investment manager on the city side.
So we have kind of raided Boulder County.
Christy's my coworker.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all really excited about kind of the trajectory and the staffing that we're bringing on board and what they can really do for us, just from a capacity standpoint.
And, you guys will be happy to offload some work.
Just a little bit.
I wouldn't call it offload, I'd just say
Share the wealth.
distribution in a way that makes more sense.
Happy to help.
All right, let's go to number 6, development project updates.
Oh, there's one more.
Oh,
Sarah's going to be splitting time in police and development service center. Sarah's going to continue working with us on the housing authority issues, but Sarah's also taking on a coordinating role for what I can tell them what you're going to be doing.
So we've had a lot of silos with the smaller enforcement groups, so code enforcement, park rangers, parking, campus supervisors. Those are the 4, and then we're basically we've had so many issues because public safety and those groups touch a lot of the work that we all do. And there's no shared data, there's no shared training, there's no shared education really. It's very willy-nilly, so to speak. So the idea is for me to kind of be that conduit to get everyone connected with all of those things, equipment, training, like I said, data sharing, and that way, you know, if you have a police officer going to deal with something they don't know, the code enforcement might have dealt with it earlier in the day. So that's going to be challenging moving forward, but we're getting a new record management system in public safety, so I think it's good timing. So that will be nice.
So the benefit for us is, I think, is just more coordination with more city departments. So as we're needing certain things, or maybe we need somebody to drive by, if there's a park ranger, and so she's going to have, you know, the pulse of everything going on. And I think at the end of the day, there's some opportunities for us on the housing side in terms of how do we even work more closely with other areas of the organization. So lots of changes this year already.
So what is your official title going to be then? Is it really long?
It hasn't changed. I'm being reassigned. So I'm, you know, between Harold, Joni, and Zach. At least I have three to go to.
Yeah. Zach and Joni are still trying. I think there's going to be an evolution to this in terms of what we're looking at, but we know we need to do the work now. So it's okay, we're going to reassign, and then we're going to continue working through to figure out what that looks like long term.
Now development of public.
Sure. So Ascent is heating up quite a bit. They're getting ready for building permit submittals, and there's a lot of moving pieces going on right now. The goal is to get building permits 1st of July and close on the financing by mid-July and start construction right away. That is something the developer really, really wants to hit for multiple reasons. That means, though, that we got to work really closely with building right now. Right now, their timelines are not lining up with our timeline, so we're going to have a conversation to see how we can help facilitate. There's new EV, electric vehicle parking lot requirements coming out that this project is going to be impacted by, which is it's wonderful for an equity lens for the residents down the road, but in the immediate term, it's a cost hit that we're trying to sort out. And so I'm going to be talking more about that with you, Harold, but I'm trying to get some information about the steps that they need to take. Of course, they need to take them like now to see if there's any sort of waiver to help this project, because it's one of those that are in progress and not going to make the cutoff deadline for grandfathering, and it results in about 40% of the parking lot having to be either EV installed or EV ready. And so
we got around that ability by having it installed, but not putting in the actual charger.
So we're going through all of those alternatives right now. There's so this is every electrical permit that's issued by March 1st has to comply, and this is specifically on multifamily. There's a lot more to it. This is a statewide thing, but we're trying to scramble pretty quick to see what the plan is going to be and how we can figure that out. So I may, if we have enough information, might be briefing the board on this next Tuesday. I'm trying to see if we can get enough information first, though. But
will this affect the Suites parking lot as well? If we're going to have to change, we're eventually going to have to redo that, right?
Right, but it's a new electrical permit is the trigger.
Oh.
So we wouldn't have that there. And City is definitely well ahead of the schedule.
Yeah, it's kind of odd because it's EV ready. I mean, there's like 3 different categories. So one is basically just putting in the conduit, another's putting in the conduit and the transformer, and then another one's putting in the conduit, the transformer, and the charger. And so I think understanding what that mix is is going to be important.
I'm trying to get cost estimates ASAP right now to just see.
Because obviously this is
Qualify
not
for the
budgeted
exemption?
for.
Nope.
Yeah.
Although I do have, since you brought it up, we put the money in for the county request with Martha for some of the solar stuff. We could look at augmenting that request to take that money and actually connect into the solar system as part of the transformers for the car charging stations. And maybe that could offset it, because that's also that new technology that will tie into Platte River and 100% renewable in terms of how you do that in a different way, use that as kind of another solution. So
There's also a state opportunity that's due this Friday that Shannon, or the development team is looking at, that is specifically this Charge Ahead Colorado program. So we're looking at all of this here in the next
3 days.
3 weeks, immediately, to try and figure out what the plan will be. So we're just in a lot of that type of thing, lots of fine tuning and firming up costs and timelines. The Early Childhood Education Center, we have applied for 6 or so grants. We have received, between the city's contribution of $525,000 of ARPA funds, or ARPA interest earnings, and then we applied for $750,000 of worthy cause. We're only awarded $150,000. So we are at just about the let's call it about $700,000 mark out of our $3 million that we need to include the ECE. Our Colorado Health Foundation app, that's our biggest one. We requested $2 million because our other STOLA Strong Communities grant didn't come through. They are telling us that that's most likely too much to ask for. So we have not filled the gap on the ECE, and if we do not fill it here by about April, it's not going to be a go. So we are furiously out there. I put in one, I did some cold calls. I put in one with I'm going to forget the name of it off the top of my head, but a foundation where the goals of the foundation align. I'm going to put one in with the Safeway Foundation because they do have their goals align, and we've got the Safeway right there. We can say that the employees could live on site and have childcare. So that one I'm trying to put together. It's all hands on deck on the ECE front to try and get that money solidified before we reach the point of no return.
Community Foundation on this one.
So we need grants. It has to be a grant. We can't have like a true loan on this one with repayments required.
Yeah.
And they were trying to set up a revolving loan fund, and they wanted to give $1 million to it, but it would have to be repaid, which we just cannot support. So we're talking with them to see if maybe if we went down to 500, could you figure out a different mechanism? So that's still in the works. So we still have that in the works, and the Colorado Health Foundation we're waiting to hear, but we're just planning on it not covering the full thing at this point and still reaching out. So that is go time there as well, because we really want to include it. It would be real shame to get this far and not have it funded when
Is that just for the core and shell funding?
Nope, it's not the shell. It's the
The
build
whole
out.
thing?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's build out. So we are all hands on deck on that.
To Lauren's point, can you carve out the core and shell of what the need is?
That's
for
what we did
continued
with
fundraising?
We're starting to come to Plan B, which
Okay.
that's when we're on the design meeting, which is right after this. We're gonna start saying, okay, can we get a revised cost estimate for just a shell, and then start filling it in as we get more funding over time. That's the Plan B, hopefully.
Do any other, like big corporations like, Walmart and Safeway have any sort of program like that you've heard of, like Target, for example? Or do you think that, I don't know, Kroger to any extent, or anything else major in town?
So far, we've reached out to multiple, just cold call basically, are you interested in this? But what I've done so far is really follow like the state's childcare portal, and then who contributes there and who is connected. It's just the trail I've been following so far, since plus capacity is limiting the amount of just research time. But we did dedicate a good amount to it, so just gonna keep working hard on it. For Crispin, we have 2 buildings that are now getting leased up. They're partially occupied, thank goodness. The next one, the TCO is coming next one for the third building next week. And then the fourth building is still a good month out or so. So it is running behind, but we are making moves. So we've got people moving in, and all of the powers that we have approved it moving to an income averaging project. So I think we have just one set of consent documents to still sort out, and then all of that will be settled as well. So it's moving along. Zinnia moving along as well. I mean, they're in full construction mode, still on target for lease up in September.
Can you expound a little bit on Recovery Cafe?
Yes. So we've got two arms of Recovery Cafe going now. So first, we were trying to get them to build the suites. It seems infeasible, primarily because they would have to have a ground lease because the land is owned by the partnership, and the partnership would not subordinate a mortgage, and so they're having trouble getting a mortgage to complete the build. So what we have worked out with them, they had a plan B working this whole time, which we knew about and were supportive of. They are looking at purchasing a site and building from there in a different location. And if the city has agreed that if they still bring in programming to the suites, then we would still make a financial contribution to help make that happen. And so that is the plan right now. And actually, they've already started programming in the suites. So we're going to be briefing that to the board on Tuesday as well, where they started recovery circles there. And it's been extremely popular off the bat. So we have a programming plan for them that I believe we went over on this group. Did we go over this? Okay. And they're off and running. We have services, recovery services in-house in the suites now. And now we're just planning for, if it really is this popular, how do we build for more, a second circle in the week, and then maybe we've talked about, could we tap into our VIA contract through the connections to the city manager's office to see if VIA can pick up residents and take them once per month over to Recovery Cafe's current site for their open mic nights, like social events. So that is the status on Recovery Cafe.
I'm going to pull, what I say, at least right now, 12,000-ish.
I think we said 10 at first.
10 to 12 from my contingency fund to help support this project. Part of it is because when I look at call volumes that we have from police and fire and lead or core responses, the more we can support them in this work, the better it's supporting the overall system. So I can really see an ROI on this one, so I'm going to fund out of my contingency. I think the food costs, all the food costs for the first circle, have some money to tap into the VIA, and then we'll be watching it closely. If we need to do another circle, then I'll pull some other funding off into this.
So is there any way that you could tie transportation with the microtransit that's coming out?
Yeah, we have to see what the RFP is going to be. But yes, I mean, I think that's the thing is once we get the RFP and we see what that's going to look like, it could be into that microtransit connection.
Any other questions about development?
Number 7, items for input from the LHA board, for the LHA Board of Commissioners, LHA goals, 2023 accomplishments, and 2024 focus areas.
Okay, so we have a document in here. Looks like there's a little bit of cutoff, but we'll do our best. So this is something that I plan to present to the board next Tuesday. You've seen this. We went over this last year. This group helped formulate these goals back in 2022. And then last year we reported on our accomplishments in 2022. And so what this does is report on what we accomplished in 2023 and what we would like to focus on in 24. So I'm trying to think about the best way to go about this. I think I'll do kind of a high-level summary of each overall goal and what we really focused on and accomplished versus if we haven't, then why. Okay, so our first goal is really about resident communications and resident quality of life. So our coffee and conversations have been super successful. I mean, they are so valuable. We get so much input from them, and the residents really do participate and give us feedback that we really use in making our day-to-day decisions. We also highlighted on here the extensive engagement process that we went through on the Village on Main. Really, the big message there is the residents at Village got something that the Aspen Meadows residents didn't, just by way of the Aspen project was right in that transition time between the old LHA and new LHA. And so we've used a lot of lessons learned to make sure that we went through this in the way that the Aspen residents told us they wish they would have gotten to do. And so that has been so successful. We have more positive feedback than negative. We have our first round of residents out. I guess I didn't mention this on our development updates. We have our first round of residents out at the hotel. We have heard no issues or problems or complaints of any sort that are, other than day-to-day managing of the small stuff. It's been really a success. I think the way that we went about it, bringing in a real relocation team, a professional relocation team, and having these engagement sessions throughout the last 2 years to prep everyone has really paid off. We did not finish our resident handbook that we wanted to have as like a welcome to LHA, welcome to your community. We didn't finish that, but we did get it started, and that will be a focus area for 24. I'm just kind of picking out some highlights, but if anybody has specific questions, go ahead and stop me.
Well, I have a question about the MSU project and how well that went in the different facilities that you guys put in.
So we did that at the Hearthstone in the Lodge.
Okay.
They ended up not choosing Aspens to do that, but for each event, it was about a 2 to 3 hour class, and we had about anywhere, it would dwindle between 10 to 15 residents at a time, but residents were coming in and out from both properties interacting.
Good.
So
Are you going to continue, or is that?
their semester is ending, so we just had our last class, not last week, but the week before.
Okay, good.
Are they going to be doing follow-up or a report out or anything like
We're
that?
waiting to hear because the group that originally started, only one has continued with it with us. So
In terms of other just resources that we brought in and partnerships, we talked about Recovery Cafe. We have the Center for People with Disabilities. That MOU was executed in 23, and that the services are kicking off now this year. We did complete our community manager's handbook. This is something that the board and staff have wanted for a long time, and that's complete, and we're just in the rollout of it now. Research efforts across other housing authorities on how do they measure quality of life. We have not tackled that in 2023. It's really just capacity, but that is something we already have we got a media inquiry here a couple weeks ago about somebody reaching out to housing authorities across the region asking, how do you measure resident satisfaction? And we have not done a full resident satisfaction survey of sorts. What we have done is those community conversations that was more of a narrative and really trying to, that was as we were building LHA back in 21 and 22. So I think that was valuable, but it's not something that we could measure necessarily. So that's something that we could look at for 24. Yeah, I think that's all tied together. Any questions about this first goal at all? Or suggestions too, if there's something that you see as could be a 24 focus area, that is something that we could consider putting on here before we go to the board on Tuesday. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. I'll keep think. Goal 2 is about core focus areas, so voucher, development, property management, etc. So this is really focused on that housing needs assessment that we did. So this one is really complete. Pretty much this whole goal is complete at this point. The grant that we did receive We have fully expended as of like January, early February this year, so we'll be closing that out here soon. We completed that housing needs assessment, and we have a dashboard that we can maintain over time that will help show our needs and how they change, and then as a result, affect how LHA plans out our developments to see what target populations we should be doing. So that's
How
just going to
often?
be continued to use.
How often do we need the housing needs assessment as well? How often are those kind of done? Like every 5 years?
They are certainly done every 5 years for the CDBG program, and then what we did was, well, give us the CDBG and then some. And so at least a portion of it is done every 5 years. And then for us, it's really in the future, if we feel like something has truly changed, like a pandemic, or just kind of if we see the needs shifting, then it would prompt the desire to do an update. Of course, that might be dependent on grant funding availability, but we'll definitely keep an eye out on that in the next few years.
I think what we don't know, so there's a lot of legislation being drafted right now that has the housing needs assessment as a component. And so I think seeing where the state moves in terms of what they're going to require in frequency is something we're going to have to watch. So generally, yes, you want a 5-year increment. It wouldn't surprise me that there's something that comes out that'll probably pull it inside around 3 years, just because the interest in the state in this and seeing what's produced and what that means to your goals.
So they can track how municipalities and counties are doing. Okay.
Yeah. It's like more bureaucracy that take us away from actually doing stuff to report.
So goal 3 is really about our voucher program. 2023 was a challenging year. HUD did not increase our voucher funding, even though in our mind we met all of the performance targets that should have resulted in an increase in funding. So we're trying to engage HUD on that and try to figure out why and what to do for this year. They were definitely not answering for quite some time in the fall is not a good time to try and call HUD since they get basically shut down. We also started formulating and did some research around our regional relationship on vouchers and how we work with BCHA and VHP's voucher program. And really in 2024, we'll want to be able to really wrap our hands around that. We've been starting the conversations, but I think that our conversations will start to do deep dives here this year. Overall, we really focused, there was a lot of NOFAs, so it's like new funding opportunities released by HUD for voucher programs. There was a ton in the end of 2022 that we looked at really hard to see if they would work for us, and they did not at the time. And then it really quieted down at 23. There just wasn't a ton out there. But our voucher team, we have a super solid team. They are settled and established, and they're ready for the next thing to see, can we start really trying to grow this program? So we're primed and ready. We need HUD to be a partner in it and have those regional conversations and really try and make some headway on this in 24. Don't expect HUD to necessarily be increasing funding across the board this year, right?
Probably not, since we're still waiting to hear from Parkstone and the Lodge to get increased funding,
So it's going to be a tough environment, but we're ready.
With HUD though, I mean, when we report to them, do we tell them which ones are part of the housing choice vouchers and which ones are project-based vouchers, or do they not care how we divvy them? Do they care how we divvy them up, or is it just?
There's a max. You can only do so many at PBVs, but
you can only do 20%.
Okay.
But our suites vouchers are not included in those because they're supported housing.
Right.
So those get excluded, which is 40 units, and then so that's why we put the ability to place them lower.
And then in terms of Yardi, is there any sort of part of Yardi that we're not using to its full effect? Or, the most efficient?
Okay. I mean, we've found several things, and just from feedback from other community managers that have used Yardi. to say, do we have this? Do we have this?
So what are some of those examples that?
So an example would be like we lost the person that was doing our state reporting. She retired at the end of December, so it was coming on the community managers to do that reporting with the state. One of the community managers reached out and said, hey, can you already do this for us? So I reached out, they said, yeah. I mean, the report's right there, here's how we do it. So I sent them, and apparently it's working. So, and some of them had to go back because I don't think Fall River was doing reports. It wasn't in this person's. So they had to go all the way back, but it was perfect because this report actually says, like, when did somebody move in, the changes to their income, and all of that can be reported on an compliance standard that the state does. So that was one thing. Another thing was the payables, having a better workflow, segregation of duties, having community managers see what actually is coming, what's actually being charged to their properties. There were several community managers that were like, these people didn't even show up, and we're being charged. And another one was like, why are we paying for these mats? Let's not pay for these mats anymore. I mean, those are just some examples. We also had them looking at the utilities because that was taken off the workflow just so that we got the utilities paid on time. But, for A&N, you could have people at A&N actually have to put the utilities in their name. And so if community managers aren't seeing this, county doesn't know if it's supposed to be in somebody else's name. So they recognize that, or they recognize the problem, like did our water just increase like dramatically? Do we have a toilet running constantly? So that type of thing. So I mean, there's definitely, and there's probably more in Yardy that we haven't even explored that we could be paying for. It's just finding those things.
I mean, do we have full advantage of Yardy, or do we have to pay on the different uses?
You do have, so we have a package that encompasses a bunch of stuff that I don't think they set up in the beginning. But then there are other packages that, yes, that you can add on to. So like our workflow and our payable package was an extra package. But by doing that, we went on a different platform and reduced some costs in other areas. So it's just researching and knowing, the struggles that the community managers are having, the struggles that HCB is having. I mean, even HCB has noticed some workflow areas, like they're doing stuff separately when there's like a workflow that can actually just move them through the process. So little things like that.
So part of it, when we look at Yardy, on the city side, we're moving into Salesforce. For starting off with our utility customers and things like that. We've been working on, we called it ECE, but what is ECE? I can't remember. The stuff Ellie Burton's working, Enabling Caring Communities, which is, we also knew organizationally that we weren't connecting across the organization for people that we're serving. So we may have core and lead working with someone. If they're an older adult, it's highly likely they're working with a senior center. And we just weren't seeing those connections. When we did, it was just pure luck with human intelligence. So our utilities went into Salesforce. We've been talking to Salesforce about enabling caring communities, and at the time we started that work, no one had that platform built. So we were working with University of Colorado School of Health, and they were working with an entrepreneur, and we were kind of doing test cases and building these. Within that 5 years, Salesforce built it. The interesting piece on Salesforce is that, and I asked this question the other day, they have an API that is built for Yardy already that is working with their system. So I want to learn a little bit about that, because now we're going to connect the financial side potentially to the human side, so that we're getting real-time information in terms of what's happening. And then that in turn works with Power BI, which then starts allowing us to create dashboards. So there's a lot more work coming in this, but it really is building these motherships and then utilizing the APIs that can pull the data so that we can start seeing certain things that's happening. And I mentioned Sarah because the work that Sarah's doing is going to be really critical in the Salesforce piece. But that also then will help Sarah connect to Kendra or somebody else. And what really kind of reinforced this in my mind is, so we were dealing with an individual that had a voucher, and she was on a payment arrangement because of an income reporting issue. And so when I was meeting with her in terms of had an accident, went on unemployment, so couldn't continue on the payment arrangement they were on, and so I met with them personally. And what struck me as she came in and she had the CARES form, which CARES form in us is utility rebates, grocery tax rebates that they get during a year, but she hadn't done that at the beginning. And so when I started asking some questions, we have 452 people on vouchers. We house what's the number now, Molly?
423.
423.
Oh, sorry. Did you say on vouchers?
No, so we have about 800
Okay.
900 people, right? We are not internally proactively signing them up for the CARES program, either on the voucher side or on the housing side. And so when we look at their disposable income, we've got to figure out a way to do this. So Eric is starting to work with that with Maria to put together something where when we house someone either through a voucher or in one of our units, we're automatically pushing them into the CARES program so they get these other benefits from the city. So it's kind of that glimpse into one person. To your point about Yardi and that Salesforce is, we need something that's connecting the dots because they're missing out on the other benefits that we have as a city. So we're going to continue working on that.
Good. Goal 4 is really all about development, which we had plenty of headway. We kind of talked about most of that already. But the one thing that we did not get into was affordable assisted living, which you'll see, and it pops up in a couple places on here. And that really was, I think we've reported on this briefly in the past, but it is going to be extraordinarily difficult. We talked to people that have done affordable assisted living, and you have to get into the Medicaid reimbursement world. One of them flat out said, don't do it. The system is not ready. It just is not ready for this. And we were hoping to maybe, rather than, we can put money into development, could we then instead buy space at an existing place? But that's an ongoing funding commitment, and what we ended up having was, with construction costs escalating so high compared to when we first set our ARPA allocation. So this is all stemming because we originally set aside a piece of our ARPA funding to try and do something around this. And every other project, their gaps rose. We had projects sitting in front of us ready to go. So the City Council did say, let's reallocate that amount that was set aside for affordable assisted living and get done what we have, and then try and figure out the best method to move forward in the future. But we really did it was totally worth the exercise to go through and try and figure out the ropes and what are the key drivers and what do you really need and what will it take. And it will take a lot. But I think that it's still a worthy thing to try and keep on our radar and see what we can do and see how Medicaid reimbursement falls together and things like that. So that's really unfortunate because it's such a high need and it's close to impossible to bring together. Okay. And I will say on this, there's a lot in here mixed in this development is converting housing choice vouchers to project-based vouchers. So we awarded out all 44 of our project-based vouchers this year. And so the Village, just gonna say the Village, cover the bases. That's already, we've got a HAP ready to go, and those Units have been assigned. We did a lottery system for the residents to get into those units, which is super, super valuable. So that is taken care of. And then the other award allocations went to Ascent. So that will be coming on board, and we will be working towards that, getting into a HAP contract as well this year. And then the Atwood project, which they're going to attempt to go for LIHTC financing again. And so we'll just kind of hold those and see if they get successful to be able to do those. So that was a big goal when I first came on to LHA, starting to transition in 2021. That was something that Kathy and Karen really wanted to do just for Health of Our Voucher program and to support development. I will say that we get development proposals all the time, and they always want PPVs, and we are fully allocated at this point. So our answer right now is we don't have anything available, and until voucher funding increases, we won't have anything available. So that is an unfortunate limiter for future stuff, because everybody does want those.
So in our future developments, we won't be able to add any PUVs unless we get additional fed funding.
Pretty much. We're maxed out.
Well, and we may have to shift
Reallocate.
and some other things. There's an interesting opportunity that has presented itself that would require us to finance it in a different way that would be both affordable and attainable. What's interesting is it's the same group that's working on the Atwood project. It may be, Molly, we need to write this down, we actually have a conversation about sliding them over into this other project if we could. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
There's nuance there.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is our preservation of affordable housing. So obviously Village on Main was the biggest target here, which we're on track with. We did put Hearthstone and Lodge is on here for the 202 program. So we did make a lot of headway on researching this and figuring out what will this take and what will it look like. And so we met with HUD to go over what their process is, and of course it's very prescribed and the timeline is very specific. And so you have to do it within you have to complete it within 90 days or something
You
of
have to
your
get your
budget.
budget approved within 90 days
Yes.
of your contract date. So,
So you have to time it extremely intricately.
well, they're not approved today. So, I mean,
I don't
it's,
even know how to plan
you
for
would,
this,
you
but-
would almost have to make sure you're under their threshold of just, which is usually 4%. So if we would just had a 4% increase, we'd probably be approved already, but because I asked for more, that's why our projects are on hold. So,
And so this is planning an entire development with a refinance, rehab, and having it all set and ready to go so that you can hit that 90-day trigger point.
well, and the
It's a
only
little crazy.
refinance is the reserve replacement. So they don't get, HUD doesn't give you additional money. It
Right.
has to be
You have to
based on
refinance yourself.
what your amount is budgeted for to move to the RAD program. And if you have reserves, that's kind of what they look at. If you have reserves to do that additional work, whether it's at the lodge or whatever, to
So it's
transition.
specific and has to be very well timed. So we've been in touch with one of our consultants that we've used on some other projects, just traditional affordable housing. She knows a consultant that has done this, and so we're engaging with him to say, let's plan this out. And what I feel like it's most likely going to be is we work in 24 to plan this out and be ready to pull the trigger in 25. Of course, if we could get all of these other little pieces to line up. So that was what would be ideal, because it has to be 24. We don't have enough time for 24, but we could plan for 25 if we have enough capacity to actually take this on. I will say in 24, and I'm thinking about our staff that we're bringing on board, and Katie. Katie's going to be in construction through September on Village. As soon as Village is done with construction, well, actually overlapping, we're going to be in construction on Ascent, and then Zinnia's going to be leasing up right at that same time. We've got other things in the works too, so it's gonna be a real busy year. But we at least want to get that consultant on board so we can see what does this really look like. How big of a lift is this and how well do we have to time this? So we also have on here the resyndication of Aspen Meadows neighborhood. So 24 is year 15. And traditionally in the past, that's the point when we would attempt to start that resyndication process. But we know that CHAFA is really looking for us to be more at the 20-year mark. And we were able to come in under that 20-year threshold on Village on Main because the last resyndication, they really only did critical system upgrades and not the rest of it. So we were able to convince them that this should be looked at earlier. On Aspen Meadows neighborhood, we don't have as strong of an argument there. So, and also considering our workload on development, that it might be an okay thing for Aspen Meadows neighborhood to come a little bit later. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to start this year with a low probability of success. You can start in a couple years. Okay. All right, that's development. Moving into partnerships with service providers. So some of this does end up kind of crossing over two of these goals that the quality of life one that we first talked about. So we've got, I've talked about Center for People with Disabilities, Recovery Cafe. We've engaged children, youth, and families to help us with service provision at Ascent. So that's not in place yet, but we've got that partnership established and it's coming. We also worked on our positions to help improve service provision. So the resource specialist position, we retooled that to be truly a resource specialist position serving seniors in all of our properties, but not necessarily focused at the suites, because the suites really just has a population that has a higher acuity of need. It's more than a resource specialist. So instead, we're redistributing that, and we've hired somebody that I have not met him yet, but apparently he's wonderful, that is just diving right in. And then at the suites, we've talked about how we're changing that model for clinicians and really making sure that we've got that the job description for the community manager there reflects the high acuity of need and the trauma-informed methods of dealing with people. So we've been working that kind of on the back end on this. So there are some partnership ideas on here that came up in 2022 that have not necessarily come forward into a full partnership yet. True Pace, they did come out and did do education on Medicaid reimbursables for residents, but we haven't necessarily partnered with them to figure out Medicaid reimbursables for any other, formal partnerships yet, but that can still be something that we look to do. And then we've talked to Nextlight, but the federal funding that makes it free or certainly reduced, but I think it's free primarily through the federal funding for residents, has really covered that need for the time being. And they've helped us. We've had events with them to make sure residents are connected to the resources to get that and that type of thing. But we didn't necessarily do a bulk agreement at this time because there was another source out there.
They're currently doing Jubilee events. The last 2 weeks and this week they're at Aspen right now doing, just trying to get more residents signed up and connected.
Okay.
On that note, Molly and I haven't had a chance to catch up on this. I had lunch with the CEO of Longmont Peak Hospital, which is UC Health, and we had a conversation about, and I also met with the CEO of Centura. So the three of us are going to have conversations about the hospital systems, how we can work collectively on something, even though they're in competition, but find an area that makes sense to work collectively. And this was the item that I threw out, is in terms of working with our housing authority residents and our voucher holders in terms of broader community health issues. So we're going to start working on that, just because we know that that will benefit them, because the more work that they can do on the front end with individuals, the less likely we are to have emergency room visits. And we also understand when we look at the financial capacity of many of the individuals in terms of the financial impact of the hospitals, there's actually common interest amongst our three organizations in in terms of calls for service, emergency room visits. And so we're going to be having that conversation over the next 6 months.
Are you hoping for like an annual like clinic where they?
We don't know. I mean,
Just
the
looking for all
options are really kind of limitless, and we talked about maybe on the side of the vouchers or even Aspen Meadow, how they bring folks in to understand and how to eat differently and things like that, and they have their own foundations that can come in and support. In terms of some of our other properties, it could be that they bring in, physicians or something and do like a free healthcare or health screening, or we don't know what it's going to look like. We just know that it's a common issue for all of us. And so when I look at it on the police side, I live near 4 properties. And I see the number of runs that our fire department is making to all 4 of those properties, and those are health related. And so what does that mean in terms of calls for service? They end up then going to either hospital, and how do we minimize the calls for service, but at the end of the day, the severity of the calls where they end up getting hospitalized for a long period of time. So we know, and it's bad to have this conversation, but we know that there's a really significant financial impact. But beyond that, we want people to be well, generally. And so it was just a brainstorm over lunch, but they both are kind of committed to doing this work together. And so we'll see where that comes out.
So when you guys are brainstorming, obviously you're talking about the acute things will bring people into the hospital, but I think you mentioned say about some preventative care as well.
Oh yeah.
You said like eating and like some sort of focus on just longer term health goals.
Yeah, the preventative piece is key because that's really what's going to shut down. Obviously ED visits will be there, but it's going to minimize that. It's going to minimize the acuity of it the more you're on the front end working with folks. And they know how to charge Medicare. So the piece is they may actually be able to tap into Medicare on some of this if they're the ones that are doing it and they know how to do it and have the infrastructure. Maybe we can bring Medicare resources in. We also talked about once they become involved, it's how do you get Hope Light or how do you get Salute to then slide in and then have really the broader, all of the systems in the community supporting what we're doing.
So I think, and the last, I meant to mention VIA. VIA's, we've talked about VIA a lot in this group, but that was one of the major service partnerships that we had going on in 23, and we'll continue that in 24 and possibly expand. There's a lot of smaller efforts too that aren't necessarily community partnerships, but staff on their own, Lisa and her crew, have put together a donations program at the suites for essentials for those that are moving in with nothing. That has been really a positive experience, I think, and it's just been a win-win. I mean, have we had any issues with it? It's just been really great.
We have residents who don't need the help from the donation wanting to donate, so it's going both ways. Other residents helping those who need it.
I think that's just telling, given capacity's tough, but we have managed to establish some great partnerships, and we're managing to kind of do what we can just in-house too to make things better for people. So the next goal on the last page, this is more affordable assisted living. So we've now talked about this on the development side, and maybe modeling different types of partnerships to try and make a dent somehow for now, and then really with a long-term goal for this. So I'm not going to rehash all that. Number 8, formalizing a partnership with a provider to establish facilities for early childhood education programs. All right, so we talked Ascent, we brought in children, youth, and families for that. What we have not done, well, we could once we get through this process with the ACE on us and we've built that partnership with the Wild Plum, then I feel like we could use that knowledge gained to see, okay, what's next? What else could we do? But generally, we've tried to, what have we brought in for families at AMN? Obviously, we only have one true family property existing that's only 28 units, so it's not a large number of families that we're talking, but we have brought in, I think this was 22 though, when we were doing those connections, seniors to kids connections.
We were doing that, but we've been inviting them to some of the Aspen Meadows stuff at the Kaiser Permanente. We've had them come in and doing craft events every 6 to 8 weeks at all the properties. They're now invited to come to Aspen Seniors. We have just different, like RC Go to Mayo parties, going away parties, just different things on the side. We're inviting Aspen neighborhood into that to start building that relationship.
This is kind of an offshoot, but we did also bring in the Eagle Scouts to do a project at Spring Creek and Fall River where they did garden beds for us, and they got Home Depot to deliver plants, and so it's smaller, more targeted, but we are trying to engage youth organizations to try and make some headway. I think there's a lot more we could do though in time, especially when we have more families on site. And then finally, home ownership pathways and opportunities. So we have not completed much in 23 on this, but we did hire at the very beginning of 24 on the city side our home ownership program specialist that as we have the 185 units of for sale affordable attainable housing that we're going to gear up in 24 to do a lottery process and start getting a pool of buyers ready to go. And with that now is our opportunity. We have the staff member and we have the project coming where this is what we can use to kickstart talking to our residents about preparation for home ownership and using the Boulder County Housing Counseling, that personal finance coaching program to try and get people geared up. So I think 2024 is a good year for this one. Okay, so overall, those are the goals that were set in 22. I feel like LHA is moving at light speed, that some of these goals are still totally applicable. Some of them were ideas at the time, but the world has morphed. There's a whole slew of things that we've completed that weren't even anticipated in 2022, and I just want to kind of highlight those and then see about what should we do in the future. So we stacked 3 different federal funding sources, which by the way is not an easy job, to do ADA accessibility improvements across all the properties and do the new playground at AMN and resurface the entire parking lot at Hearthstone Lodge. And we'll bring in the security cameras in 24 across all the properties to tie into the city system. There's a bunch of capital stuff that we've been working on just for, really it is for quality of life and getting our properties to be as good as they can be. And so that is not reflected here, but we've completed all of those projects except for the security camera in 2030. We sold 615 Main, which was hugely beneficial to the Center for People with Disabilities. Also, we got services out of it. Also, that was a financial plus for the Housing Authority. We haven't, there's nothing about meth on here, but we've been doing a ton of work on that with the new cleaning company that we're testing out and the meth detectors that we've been working on, so that's not reflected here. I think I might have it on here, but I didn't mention the declutter events that we did. It's basically hoarding prevention across all the properties where we brought in dumpsters. We organized an effort for people to declutter what they were wanting to. And I think that all the residents were super happy with that. It was just an opportunity where they don't always have somewhere they would like to get rid of something, but they don't have a way to move it out or put it anywhere. Elder share volunteers. I think I did have that in there. I just probably skipped over it. We updated our property tax exemption policy, which sounds kind of dry, but honestly, it brought LHA into the income averaging world and prepped us for that entire world, which is clearly the path forward in LIHTC, so it seems. We did the Adrian House, which is in 2019, City Council directed staff there are multiple houses that the city owns because they wanted to purchase the land for either open space or water, and they had houses. And some of them were vacant, the Adrian being the first one, where on the city side, we spent over $200,000 rehabbing it so that we could rent it to a low-income household. And then we completed that, the property management agreement. Basically, all of the structure got in place in 23 for LHA to be able to manage that. And we have it ready to go. Turns out renting it is incredibly challenging, but we're getting there. It's Weld County with voucher programs in Boulder County going into Weld County. Weld County Housing Authority is not necessarily super responsive, but we're trying to get a household in there, preferably with a voucher. And then we made headway on our asset transfer from LHDC to LHA. The Spring Creek property has one approval left to go before it's ready to be transferred into an LHA asset, and then Chrisman will come next. And so that is still moving forward. We've been working on that, or having our attorneys work on that for us over this whole year. And then talking about, we overhauled our city vehicle purchase and snow removal programs, completely overhauled that for operational cost savings and to get better service to the residents. So there are some things that are not reflected on here that I wanted to make sure we highlighted about what we did in 23, because it was a really big year. And want that to feed into our plans for 2024 and beyond too. So the question I wanted to ask is, A, is there anything that you would recommend that the board add in here as a focus area for 24? And B, this isn't the prettiest way to do this. I would love to spend the time to make this much more of a functioning document, but what I would really like it to be is more of a living document that we can add goals to and remove old stuff. And so that's an effort that might be for the next year, but if there's any ideas from this group on the best way to keep this more alive rather than a spreadsheet once a year, that would be.
Well, Molly, we may help with this too from our strategic integration group, because this is a council goal, so this is the stuff that I'm gonna wanna be pulling into dashboards, so.
Great. Any input or feedback?
In terms of goals, like closing down LHDC, I think that could be just a goal in itself, just getting that done. Is it going to happen in 2020?
Well, now it's not closing down, but it
Well,
is morphing
eventually.
to, it's morphing to we're trying to use it as a charitable organization. So
Right.
that is, I would say, certainly a goal where we really we've talked about how many opportunities, and we talked about where if we could have somebody really able to focus on that charitable side and the partnerships and bringing that money in, that would be really great. And LHDC is our vehicle for that.
Yeah, the Fall River's the problem because of the way that it's structured. It's far out in time, right, when we can do that. So how we work with them collectively and on the charitable pieces, we only need to keep it. So how can we augment it and get them more engaged? And I think the other thing that's changed is with all the development, they are doing stuff now. So there is a different interest in wanting to stay involved. I think where they wanted to disengage was when there wasn't development going on. And so we're just gonna have to work through it. But the charitable piece, I think, is the big one.
Then eventually well, I guess we would always keep LHDC then open as a charity side, but transfer all the properties out
Yes.
into LHA, right? Okay.
I would just add that I think a big topic of discussion that's going to start this year is IDD housing. I don't think that that's been
What was
included.
that?
Intellectual disability, developmental disability housing.
There's money there.
There's lots of money at the county level. There's a mill levy for Boulder County, so there's millions of dollars to tap into for the services, which are the hardest part to underwrite. Most service providers, you got to twist their arm to underwrite for 10 years, 15 years. It's impossible. But this is a fund that's not going to go away. So it is more possible. And I have great connections with Rebecca Seiden and HHS. We've been trying to do it at Willoughby Corner Phase 2, which I will no longer be focused on, so I would like to address that in the Longmont side. How do we fit that in? It's not the same as permanently supported housing. It's different, but it has its own issues with Medicare, Medicaid waivers. So lots of conversations happening about that. I don't think it'll be something we're able to incorporate necessarily in 2024, but getting some of those conversations started with the state. Because that's through a voucher program that we would target, the 811 vouchers. So it wouldn't affect our vouchers, it would increase the number in our units.
Yeah.
So that's one goal that I'd like to see before I formally start.
So this sounds very small compared to that sort of thing, but sort of is like a subsection under the, you know, resident quality of life and, you know, education. I remember Harold said at one of the meetings a while ago that emotional support dogs were like allowed in units, right? That's something federally that if you've got a support animal and it's different, it's like more inclusive than say the dog that can get like on an airport or something. So when we were having our meetings at all the different places, I'm a huge dog person, so I just kind of watched, and there were a lot of dogs coming in and out, and often, you know, big dogs. And I just thought that something that might be helpful for educating the public is to just, you know, even just put up flyers and resources or contact the Humane Society about low-cost behavioral training, because that, you know, these dogs are, you know, I love them, but dogs are animals, and I think like training around especially more vulnerable populations like older people and small kids would be helpful. And then also, you know, as we're continuing to, you know, improve the properties to have areas that are specific, you know, just like small areas for dogs and places so people can clean up after them and make sure that they've got a designated place. Again, it's small, but I think it's like one of those things that really starts to irk people or can't even be dangerous without having some good resources available, like through the LHA. So nothing that, or sorry, not LHA, I keep saying that, LHS, Longmont Humane Society. Sorry about that. So again, it's something small, but if it just, I saw the dogs coming in and out, and I just thought it might be a good thing while we're thinking about minor improvements in properties going forward.
We actually have a start on that. We have at the suites, they're doing a shot clinic.
Great.
Not the Humane Society, but I want to say Millie's, there's a group Millie's that is coming in doing a shot clinic for all the animals, for cats and dogs at the suites this month.
Great, yeah, it's fantastic.
Remedies?
I would just say, I think, do we have one for like operational just improvements? I mean, we just have a goal for that and just list anything, you know, like some of what that Sarah's gonna be working on in the future. And then,
Right, and bringing in a
yeah.
assistant director, like I've got a million goals in my head, so I feel like that's a huge piece that's not necessarily here.
I'm not sure how you phrase this, but I think it's important to focus on actual home ownership. And so that's a goal on there for number 9 is establishing the partnerships. But home ownership, just the impact that has can be generational. And so I think building that in as a goal would be important.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I mean, you made me think, you know, there's a lot of people that are living in Aspen. And as we look at the affordable for sale units that we're going to be building at Mustang, I mean, what you made me think about is how do we start working with them? Because if you can get them to move from Aspen into a home ownership opportunity, then you open up Aspen for even more people that need family housing. It's how do you, that's a good point. That's actually a really good goal in terms of creating a pipeline.
And I think we need to also focus on having a revolving loan fund for emergencies. Because that's one thing that people forget. Like, you buy a house, and even if it's affordable, if your furnace breaks, how are you gonna pay that? You don't necessarily have the disposable income to put down $10,000. When I lived in my unit, my tankless water heater broke, and thank God it was under warranty. I still had to shell out $2,000 for them to install a new one for the labor. So how can we support homeowners in a situation where they have to make a huge purchase? And then education. I didn't know if you buy a condo, you can get coverage under your homeowner's insurance for when they levy assessments, huge assessments, that you just pay your deductible. I didn't know that was a thing until I looked it up. Other people don't know that that's a thing. So,
We do have a CDBG program specifically for things like furnace went out if you're
Yeah.
unqualified. But that
maybe
doesn't
expanding
necessarily
that, if the
super
home
quick.
ownership it becomes larger, you would be to that.
Well, there's, down payment assistance programs, matching funds type programs. As you're building your pipeline, you gotta start doing that now.
Right.
But
That is on the city side, because this was 23 was our first year of real serious fee in lieu revenues from the inclusionary housing side. We're going to work on and propose potentially a locally funded down payment assistance, because our federal one is just too difficult. So, because we are gonna need those buyers to be able to access that. So we'll see, that's an idea, we're gonna formulate it and then take it to council still, but
Now, Erica, would you add for me to talk to David and Becky? I mean, you've really got me thinking to say, well, if I'm looking at our sustainability goals, 100% renewable electricity, can we, and you're talking about a fund, can I create a fund that actually is larger out of the utilities that says we're gonna put so much money away? If water heaters and things break, we can pay to convert it to electricity. But then we put some type of deed restriction on that house that says it has to remain affordable or whatever over time. So then we have a pipeline, and then we have an increasing level of stock. Utility funds are paying for it, but it's actually benefiting them on the sustainability goals that they have. So can we have that?
Anybody have any other input on the LHA goals or for 2024? Move on to number 8, resident quality of life. Anybody have anything to this agenda item? On to number 9, LHA report, update on operations. Age receivables report, number 1.
So it's kind of just a fluctuation right now. In September, you can see our past tenant balances was at $59,000, now it's at 31. And it's just a process of those tenants that get evicted, have costs, we try to go through get a payment plan on collections, then it gets sent to accounting, we send it over to collections. So it's kind of, I mean, there's nothing on the AR that is concerning, and it's just kind of going to be fluctuation from quarter to quarter depending on who we have in the eviction process and where they are at in that process, on whether or not we have a higher past due balance versus a lower one. Do you guys have any questions on this?
So typically, I mean, we got Suites, Spring Creek are typically our higher tenant balances amounts, or are those different?
Well, Suites is always going to.
Yeah, Suites is higher.
It's always going to have those units that are tested. That seems to be another property that always has meth units. And so that's where usually the higher cost balances are. And the longer it takes now to evict somebody if they're not paying rent. We did decide to change our admin plan, the HCB voucher, which I think is going to benefit some of these tenants because our HCB vouchers we're requiring in our admin plan that somebody has to pay at least $50. But what was happening is that these people have no income whatsoever. They can't pay that $50, so we're not helping the landlords out. We had some of those situations at our properties as well, where lawyers were kind of saying, you're evicting on $150, but technically you're also evicting the same person next to them that owes more. So it's like, how do you have to have fair housing. You can't treat one tenant different than the other. But we did notice a flaw in our system that we probably shouldn't be requiring an amount on our HCB vouchers. because it doesn't assist the landlords if that person really can't pay the $50 to you. So we are changing that.
What is the current legislature being proposed in regard to evictions this year? Is that totally different from last year, or is something added, or?
I have not seen anything come across from Sandy regarding eviction, so I don't know, but we can definitely look into it.
I think it's just proposed right now. They're going through the process of trying to figure out what's going to stick and what's not going to stick.
So they are revisiting just cause, or for cause now.
So that is going to council tonight, that one. So I'm glad this is coming up actually, because I'm in the middle of reviewing several of these. The cause one is going to council tonight for a vote of support or do not support. There is another one regarding, there's multiple, there's like 5 flying around right now. Tenant protections. What was that one about, Lisa? It's not specifically eviction process, but
Like, we have to give them a settlement amount to move out, like, we have to pay them to move.
that's the just cause one.
But it's called for cause now instead of just cause. They've taken out, last year's was horrible. This year's is a little more digestible, but still awful. But what they took out this time is relocation. You don't owe for that. And then also.
It is still there, but if you do it wrong.
Correct, yes, but not if you do it correctly. But it took out the lease, you can offer a totally different lease at the end of the term, which you couldn't do before, a substantially different lease in their first just cause. And then this one also has, so the financial penalties are there, but kind of secondary, but this one doesn't exclude you from raising rent during that. So you can manage your tenants out under this bill by just saying, your lease amount is now $6,000, at least as a private landlord, right? So if you want them out, you can, there's no financial restriction in how you can do that. So you can't end their lease without cause under this, but you can also raise the rent however much if you want to use that as a managed option, which is what will happen. Which is such a stupid, okay, let's make rent really wildly expensive, right?
So in my analysis that I provided to Sandy for tonight's conversation, my analysis centered around basically, I see the problem you're trying to solve. This is solving a lot of things around the problem, but not necessarily diving to it. I am worried about, when we are dealing with behavioral issues and we're trying not to evict, termination of lease is sometimes the best for everyone involved. And it keeps it off their record and etc. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about no such thing as a month-to-month lease anymore. Always having 90 days. I'm worried about that for the housing authority. But I did speak to one of the housing advocates in our area about this, who helped write it. And the point is, the reason that it is going forward in this form is that they hear a lot about how tenants are just having leases term out basically because of things like complaints about not getting items fixed and fair housing. And I said, well, fair housing, we already have fair housing to cover that. And there's already something in place about.
We already have to have it.
And we already have those things. And so apparently people are finding ways around it, and they are just seeing a lot of people being termed out of their leases for reasons that seem to be not, this is her words, the advocacy role, not worth the impact to the community and society. Where we're then having people unhoused and subject to having to find new places with higher rents feasibly. So I see what they're trying to do. The mechanisms, my recommendation on the mechanisms is not quite targeting the right issue, but.
Well, and so under the new for cause instead of just cause, is that one thing that a private landlord could do myself is just term them out via a massive rent increase, right? Like,
Which
but you guys can't do
unintended
that.
consequences
And you get,
are
but the housing
significant.
authority wouldn't be able to have that same.
Right.
You'd be stuck in
Right.
where I could just be like, I don't like you, I want you to go, your rent is now,
Right.
I don't know, whatever I wanted to make it so I can get big enough. Which is what I'll do. I mean, that's exactly what.
So that's an unintended consequence that I think is not worth it. And number two, another unintended consequence is this looks so unattractive to rent. To lock yourself into such a massive commitment that I'm afraid that it'll discourage landlords from renting, period, which then drives our costs up overall anyway. So those were my concerns.
I let a unit, because of the new eviction protections that came through last time, I let a unit sit, and I've never done this before, I let it sit for 5 months empty. Because I just couldn't find someone that I thought was gonna be great. I would have never done that before. And now you're super careful about what you're thinking about doing. Because you're stuck with them. You're literally married to this tenant. And it's, and so I would, as a private landlord, I'd rather let it sit. And
That is an unintended consequence that we're not trying to
and that's,
promote.
I mean, I
So.
definitely talking to my landlord, small landlord peers, they're just taking them off the market altogether, selling them,
Right.
leaving them vacant. That's just my 2 cents,
Yeah.
Anytime they start sticking their fingers in it, it makes it, there's always residual.
So, I mean, we've kind of seen it in a lot of places. We've seen it in criminal justice reform and other places where they don't take the time to understand how the world works. And so they're legislating to the exception, not the rule. And then the unintended consequences just start snowballing. I mean, not that it's housing, but the best example of this was car theft legislation. I mean, they shifted it so dramatically that Colorado went first in the nation in car theft. And because there's no penalty. This is exactly what's going to start happening. And the unintended consequences, people like yourself, if you rent homes and things, you're probably going to start selling them.
Also, I mean,
And
we have 2 single-family homes in our portfolio that aren't multifamily. As soon as they vacate, those are going out of market.
Right.
Like, we're just done. I've been approached by a REIT to bundle it and sell it, and I would have never considered that before. But now, I mean, and what's better, a private landlord who lives in the community or a REIT out of Texas? Like, how are the tenants going to be better off under the REIT or with me here?
Yeah.
I guarantee they're not going to be better off. So you're just going to, especially in that middle market, like the 25 to 50, where it's still mom and pop, but you're managing
right.
a larger portfolio. I hear that people are just done.
Are you okay with me sharing that?
Sure, of course. I'd be more than happy to. I mean, we actually, for the first time ever, had to put a firm on retainer for attorneys because I just can't. The changes happen so fast and quickly in every legislative session that I no longer, as a private manager, can even keep up. But I mean, I'm spending so much money on legal fees and figure things out. In this next session, like, I would redo my lease. I just redid it, and the lawyer that I retained was like, "Why? Why even bother? Wait till in June. It's going to look completely different."
Well,
And
you go, in these outside, the states that have these owners, we have no way, when we have problems, it's like I'm trying to hunt down an owner of a vacant lot right now, and it's a nightmare, let alone a rental. It's very difficult.
So if you want, you can, public invited to be heard is at the beginning of the meeting. This will be at the end of the meeting, so it might be a little bit of time, but you can always stand up and speak to that if you'd like to.
Or
I got off my chest right there. You heard what I said.
Or if not, I think it's important for us to take what you just said and to say to the council, look, we're specifically hearing from folks that are saying they're going to sell and we're going to lose local ownership and move into the REITs. And if they think they have a problem now, wait till the REITs start playing their games, then
They're not gonna let my tenants pay their late fees and Pasola, like they do now to me.
Right.
Right? Like, I'll take your late fee in a pot of Pasola. Like, I
Right.
literally have a tenant who does that. It's like,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry it's late, here's your soup. You know, and I'm like, I'm great with that, but it would be really, I mean, and in terms of like single family homes or the larger occupancy, the
Yep.
4 bedrooms plus, that is gonna be so diminished in terms of rental stock, I think, if this continues.
You know,
This started happening
we're
last
seeing
year.
less and less pro se and so forth.
You just
More
can't do
lawyers
it.
represented.
Yeah, you gotta hire.
The negative thing with the client is, I go through this all the time with one particular agency. Their lawyer fees are $1,200 to $1,500 for the time they do an eviction. And that gets dumped back on the tenant.
And my last was 1,800.
Yeah.
It's my attorney's fees for conviction.
We said this, Susan and I and
That's great.
Joan back, a bunch of us have talked about this for years, that that's exactly what's starting to happen, is these mom and pops are gonna sell out to these big real estate corporations. They're not gonna deal with it, they're-
It's
and
happening.
your lawyer fees are gonna be even higher.
exactly.
So the LHA board does not necessarily take a stance on legislative issues. That's definitely on the city side where I'm doing the analysis and such. But I feel like this is a valid conversation to be having here each year during the season and going over some of these.
As a large housing provider, directly
Right.
affects the LHA. Like,
Yeah.
how do you manage how do you screen your tenants? What are you having? Can you get rid of a tenant? I mean, how much does it cost? You have the same issues that the housing authority has the exact same issues that any private landlord's gonna have. I mean, the rules don't.
So maybe even if because when I submit the analysis, I'm talking about, the city program's perspective, and I go into what the community impacts could be. So in this case, landlords, which includes LHA. So even if we don't have the LHA board directly taking stance, it goes through the city and we're considering it kind of in both ways. So maybe next meeting, we still have some of these in progress. In each legislative season, maybe we'll start to bring some of this to this conversation.
And tonight when Sandy goes over this, I'll jump in with Sandy and say, look, this did come up in the housing authority meeting, and there's a lot of concern based on the unintended consequence of reducing the number of local landlords and selling into REITs, because this presents too steep of a challenge to deal with. And so I'll figure out how we jump into this one.
It's the loss of, sorry to cut you off, but it's the loss of local landlords, but it's also just the cumulative cost that
Right.
will be borne by the tenant. I mean,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
they're just saying, hey, it costs me $1,200 to evict you every, 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm gonna raise everybody's rent by that much so that I can cover it, so.
That is, and in terms of the forecast, the only way to, now if you're stuck with that tenant or you're more married to them, the only way to get them out is to, in the private space, would be to raise their rent to an astronomical level, or in the case of the housing authority, you're gonna have to evict them. It's going to, in order to, instead of just saying, look, this doesn't work, it's not working for you, it's not working for your neighbors, your lease is over, and now you're gonna have to go down the path of actual eviction, which is a worse scenario than any lease of any term.
So the other one out there that I've sent around to Susan and Lisa so far to help get some feedback on is this is the breach of warranty of habitability. Have you familiar with that one at all yet?
Yeah.
I'm just getting started, so I don't have anything yet, but maybe we put this on next month if we're still, I don't want to wait too long and make sure we get this in before they start talking about it, but that is another one that's on our plate.
I sent you a calendar invite for today. I know it's last minute, but the Apartment Association is doing a 30-minute legal thing on all these today.
Okay.
Can you record that, or are they recording that?
I'm not sure, but I just got the link last night, so.
Their state.
See if they're recording it, they are, I think you would.
The
be
city
good to
doesn't
see
take a
the
position
inside.
on every single proposed bill, but on ones that seem significant.
Like, we
So-
never touched these bills until the housing authority became part of the city. Once the housing authority became part of the city, Sandy started forwarding those in, because it wasn't anything that we were necessarily involved in operationally.
Well, but the state is taking more, I guess, aggressive
They're guiding it,
approaches
yeah.
on this, like the ADU issue and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Throughout the last time, so.
Yeah,
They're kind of going into, municipalities and counties, form of governance at this point.
yeah, it's interesting. My wife's going into real estate. We're talking to some friends, and they're like, "Well, you can get into rental properties." And I'm just sitting there going, "Nope, don't do it." Which is bad, right? Because if I'm sitting there as an individual telling my wife, "Do not do this," and she can do what she wants. But seeing where I am and saying that, what is that about the supply?
So we ended up here. Were we talking about accounts
Yeah,
receivable?
to property and financial reports
Yeah,
for
I
the
think we're
fourth
going to
quarter.
the, yeah. So guess what? We do have a lot of legal fees this year. So some of the increases are just budget overruns. We have utilities. It was usually the gas that was over on those properties because we didn't budget in time for that increase. So we saw gas prices increase on all of our properties. We have insurance. We have insurance repairs and non-insurance repairs happening. Because of our insurance rolls over in September, any claims before that, if there was math, were covered. Any claims after that were not covered. So we have to see about paths moving forward to get these units. Hopefully this cleaning company will be our godsend and help us out along the way on there. And then we have legal costs, and a lot of it's evictions. And yes, we are doing the same thing. The legal costs are going back to the tenant, and then that goes to collections. But we haven't. I mean, we've sent about $400,000 over to collections, and we haven't seen anything. And I don't think we'll see anything, mainly because a lot of it's just costs and fees. I think we might be able to see stuff if it was rent. There are some that have rent tied to it, and at least if it does have rent, then we can take it to those credit agencies to show that. But if it's fees, we can't. So
The tenants get money from the LHAAB program.
Do they get-
eviction or the eviction? It's a program that tenants use when they can't pay their rent. It's a county program, get money to help cover that.
That closed.
ERAB.
It's
I still run.
It is, that's.
Yeah, we're still getting money for
I
it.
got money last month.
Oh,
I was surprised actually.
They're not taking any new applicants or anything. There's another one out of, Susan and I were talking about, out of, yeah, but it's very hard now because now they're taking anybody who has just a late notice, not even a,
What they're taking
on the
is
docket.
people that have an eviction hearing. And they're starting to get so overwhelmed that they're turning around pretty quick. It's starting to drag out now.
yeah, she says they're about backlog 300 to 400 right now.
So
My question is, do our tenants do that, and would it be worthwhile for us to step in to help them with those programs? Before it gets to the point where we get involved in lawyers and lawyer fees and all this stuff. But that's the biggest issue I see with tenants when I deal with on Fridays is they're in eviction court before they can apply for money, and by then they've already accumulated $1,000 in legal fees, which Eric won't pay for.
Well, and I don't know how many, you might know the number of this, is actually how many of our evictions are related to. And I think you even commented once, on the docket, it was never because of rent not being paid. It's usually for something completely different. And usually probably involves rent in the same process, but it's not the reason.
Just recently, we had a few rent ones, but typically if they owe rent, and we are trying to hook them up with every resource here, and I work very closely on this, like, have they gone to the Arts Center? Have they gone to Senior Services? Have they gone to a woman's work? Have they gone through this? And I go to Susan before we even hit the document.
A lot of work.
So unfortunately, but what happens is we inflate our revenue because we're charging the tenant, and then we also inflate our bad debt expense, because then we just write that off as soon as it goes to collections. So it's kind of, it washes really in the end on our financials, because of that, unless we get money in.
So I guess it goes back to something you guys were saying earlier. What's the cheapest route to go? Take them and incur lawyer fees and all this, or just run out the end of the lease and get terminated?
I think it's situational based.
Yeah.
I mean,
Severe.
you could let it ride, but if you have a significant issue with that resident, then that's a long time.
I'm just talking about money.
Well, I think a lot of times on the money side, we do try to work with them and find other solutions. And I mean, it's really, I think, if it's just purely financial, if we're ever pulling the trigger on an eviction because of financials, it's because we have tried to work with them and find different solutions, and they have just not worked with us. And at that point, the number's pretty big. But I mean, I would just say there on the financial side, from the housing authority's perspective, we're leading them to where the resources are, and they're just not taking it. And that's typically, I think, when we step in and go, okay, we're done. If you see rent connected into the other ones, it's because the issues are so significant that when you're trying to deal with a significant issue, obviously what do? You put everything in there to say it's multifaceted. But like I said, I can only think of 2 or 3, Lisa, on rent.
It's, probably the last 6-8 months we've took in 3 for rent.
And I know, at least on the ones I negotiate, and this is not rent, but this is HCP vouchers. So it's termination of the voucher. I have probably 7 or 8 settlement agreements that is really above, 3,000 or 5,000.
We have quite, I think we have probably anywhere from 20 to 30
Yeah.
people that owe HCP money back.
And so the way it works is Kendra and her staff can do it if it's below, I think, 2,000. If it's above 2,000, then they sit with me and we work out the payment plan. So we, to the point, 20 to 30. Of the 20 to 30 that we've had, I think there's only been, at least on the ones that I signed, thus far, there's only 1 that we've had to terminate the voucher because they didn't stay in compliance with the agreement or come and talk to us about why they couldn't. So it's a rarity for us.
So if it's not money, and taking that out of the picture for what are we really evicting people for? I don't see them anymore since I can't.
Disturbances,
Behavior.
community, like outbursts in the community consistently. I know they're getting the 30 days, they're violating that. Other harassment.
Significant behavior issues that have occurred over time and multiple occasions. People naked as a jaybird in the hallways, a couple of occasions.
I don't have that in my
Breaking,
Public indecency. That's kind of the problem.
breaking into our facilities, threatening other tenants, loud disturbances that occur on repeated occasions that's disturbing everyone else. I mean, it really is that significant behavior. Even minor behavior, if they work with them, you know, we don't tend to go down that road, but it's the significant issues.
Are there a good deal for, again, taking meth out of the equation but for other drug-related evictions, people like selling for anything like that, or it's usually just actually physical behavior? Yeah.
We haven't had any selling.
Probably
There was one that we at least suspected
Okay.
at Village Very out the back
Correct.
door.
Right.
Sorry, that was.
We're trying to get like.
That's old. Yeah.
We're trying to get addicts help and whatnot. I was just wondering if there were some drug crimes that we were victim people.
That is extremely rare.
The challenge on that, and this kind of gets into the suites and the security conversation that we had this conversation with DOH and MHP. And why do we have security there? Because I would say the area where the suites is located, it's not so much the other tenants selling to them, it's the people that are selling that are kind of trolling the area to facilitate it. And so for us, part of the reasons why Sarah and I talked about this, why we need security there, is as much to do with the outside influences and the threat to the individuals living there as it is with, probably I would say maybe more of that. And then being able to help with the disturbances that we're seeing. But, you know, it's extremely frustrating when I hear from Sarah and others the amount of preying activities that occur, not only on our properties, but I think around the community generally. They know where they live, they know where they are, they're going. I mean, it's just that, it's bad.
So December is also when the financials are really like in a negative because we've added the interest and we've added the depreciation. We usually don't have those on a monthly basis because I think it helps our property managers manage their budgets. And it kind of gets in the weeds of things. If they're all seeing negatives, they probably wouldn't actually think they actually have money. But that's tendency why most of these are in the negative.
Right. Well, in terms of I had a question on the financing expenses. What are we budgeting for in there? Is that just interest, or are we? Because a couple of them I'm seeing that they're kind of over budget like quite a bit, like even like Aspen Meadows Senior. What's included in the budget compared to what's included in actual? Even like I think the suites too. Looking on, that sounds pretty significant over.
So I'm thinking, or are they yellow? Is that general expenses? Hold on. I don't have details. Sometimes I just don't tell you what's there. So financing expenses are all those loans.
Okay.
So it's not just the mortgage, and we don't budget for that particular expense that hits every year.
Okay. So you're budgeting for the mortgage interest then?
We do budget for the
but
mortgage interest,
not the other.
but we just don't budget for the other ones because then it'll throw everything in negative. So it's any loan that's come in, affordable housing fund, home loans, that are on those portfolios that have a 2 to anywhere to 5% interest on an annual basis that we have to record. So that's what's in those. And if you want more details to that, like on annual, like to look at it annually, I'm happy to bring that to you if you prefer that.
Any other financial questions? Let's move on to then the voucher issuance account.
So we just recently sent this to HUD. I haven't shown you guys the first page of this. The first page kind of gives you what HUD has given us funding for. So that first set of columns will let you know what HUD is projecting for 2024 to give us, what we have in the current year. And those two, I don't know whoever built this spreadsheet. There are so many macros, but you enter the data and it tells you if you're going to be underfunded or overfunded in 2 years. So it's kind of why they call it the 2-year tool. We don't ever really touch the funding proration. That's kind of already set. And then the second set of columns, they provide us with what our attrition rate is through PIC. And what PIC is Tracy sends reports to them on a monthly basis to say who no longer has a voucher, who's got off the program, all the details of each voucher, whether new or leaving. And they expect our attrition rate is about 10.4% right now. And the other part is the success rate and the other fields below that, like how long it takes us to lease, is through Yardi. So Yardi also tracks this information. We can pull this report and it'll give us these details, so we can enter those into the report. Which then goes to the next section, which is where are we gonna be at in 2 years? So it kind of does an analysis of what we've submitted, what our actuals are, and what vouchers have been issued. We have 7 vouchers issued at the moment when we ran this report. Based on this analogy, we will not be adding any vouchers, and we are hopefully projecting anywhere from 3 to 4 vouchers coming off the program on a monthly basis. So that way in October of 2024, we can add 18 vouchers for Village Place, for the community. But right now, this portfolio shows us coming in, using all of our reserves, coming in within like $50,000. So we're gonna have to closely monitor this. Because of the payment standards, they've been up pretty high, they went up, about $200 per month per unit. So depending on when those, and what we're seeing is because of the taxes, landlords are increasing the rents. They need, and so they're going to the top level. So we have to monitor that. It is pretty aggressive, like you can see 1295, and then this yellow column over here kind of does an analysis of what it thinks your voucher per voucher amount is going to be per month, and that's how it kind of analyzes if you're going to be underrun or overrun in 2 years. By March, we'll find out what our actual funding is for 2024 and then 2026, and we'll start the whole brand new. Right now, we're still kind of in the old 2-year tool, and then we'll start the new 2-year tool come March. When they give the new funding, they'll give us a new 2-year tool that has our new dollar amounts. So that's where we kind of stand right now. We won't be issuing any more vouchers unless we lose a ton and feel like we have to. But right now, to be able to fund Village Place, their PBVs, we have to start bringing stuff out of the program. And with the cost increase, it's, right now we have, at the end of 2020, we had 426 vouchers, and we expect to be at 412.
How does importing other vouchers from other agencies affect this?
Well, it depends on the type of voucher. So like we have SRO vouchers, that's on a completely separate program and it runs its own path. When we transfer Hearthstone and the Lodge to a RAD program, those will be on a separate program, they run their own path. We have portability vouchers right now, but we have not been able to absorb them. I think we have about 10 or 11 that have ported into Longmont or surrounding areas in Boulder, but we haven't been able to absorb them. If people poured out from us, it's all dependent on the same thing. Is that housing authority going to absorb them, or are we going to continue to have that voucher? So it's really the port outs that if the housing authority there absorbs them, then that releases a voucher on our side, which could be part of the attrition rate as well, part of the reduction.
Any questions? All right, public health and safety updates.
All right, we are in the process of getting some bids for a security contract for security companies. Eric and I are working on that currently with our purchasing department. And so
We're still using the same security that we were using with the suites.
So they are, as of yesterday morning, they are no longer there. So their contract ended. It was pretty much the emergency contract with them. So now we're waiting for these bids to come in and work with purchasing, hopefully happening ASAP. So we're staying on that. Actually, one of the companies reached out to us and asked for us to provide a tour of the suite. So I met them yesterday morning out there. Their company is called Code 4. They had four people show up for a pretty extensive tour around the building, showing them what we currently have going on as far as cameras, access control, the problems that we see on a daily basis. So that was the only company that's reached out to us for a tour, so that was a good thing. Eric, anything else on the security piece? But we are just looking for weekends, nights, and holidays for that coverage. And then monitoring across the board, essentially when we get our cameras, having that individual or that company monitor the other properties via camera. So, talking to Harold about the met detectors, it was decided that we're purchasing 2 of the newer platform devices to put in to where we see is needed. We're working on that right now. The one we do have, it's a newer platform. This is like Groundhog's Day. I'll be saying this, but again, it's successful, but we're seeing the same issues picking up that carrier. So drain the battery pretty significantly.
So the 2 we're gonna buy, we're gonna put where we know we have strong signal strength to then make sure that the batteries work. And then we're looking at other solutions to boost the signal strength
Right.
where needed.
Because it goes through cell instead of Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
So moving into that, so we're looking at either cell boosters, leasing space, which I'm meeting with Tracy before the end of the week. Leasing space at these properties, so cell carriers would come in and that might be a potential thing that they'd like to do. And we're also looking at next level. So we have 3 options that will basically come down with once we get this leasing space question, if that's even a possibility. So hopefully having some answers real sooner for this area.
When you say leasing space, you're talking about putting a cell tower on the building. I would be real careful of that for any future re-syndication projects and thinking about how you write your lease.
Yeah.
We financed one for Brothers redevelopment where they had a cell site on the site that just had to be relocated, and that probably added 12 to 18 months to the process.
Really?
Yes. Wow.
So just be thoughtful if you do that, how you write your lease to accommodate it.
Good points.
Yep.
And then as far as resident updates, it's been pretty smooth. We're gonna ramp up coffee conversations starting this week, and I'm really going to ask the residents to put some thought into what they would like to see from the public safety side as far as presentations, what they want. So, and building that out for the year. That's all I have.
Anything, updates from Executive Director? And any other business that anybody has? All right, let's adjourn at 10:02. Thanks, everybody.